This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. It's beautiful-ish out, I guess. Kind of overcast where I'm at. Whatever. Hope it's fine where you are, or at least comfortable. Before I get into today's topic, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Old Guy Gamer, good morning. Noah Essentio, good morning. Keever Dam, good morning. Funtime Bats, good morning. Hammer, good morning. Matt Barnes, good morning. And Derek LaRue, thank you so much for your continued support and generosity. Really, really appreciate it. Hope you're having a excellent Sunday so far. Brittany Holland, good morning. Bridget, good morning. Shio Gorath, good morning. Ebony Williams, good morning. Non-Vitae Rex, good morning. Ryan R., good morning. And Twisted Skipster, good morning as well. I'll try to get a few more in before... Oh, Simon Willikins, good morning. Hope you're all doing good. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good morning. And I'll try to get to a few more as I see them. But yeah, so welcome to Sunday. First off, I want to thank everybody who turned up for yesterday's Living on Borrowed Crime episode with The Disturbing Truth. It was kind of a crazy beginning to everything because of Murphy's Law and just the way the cookie crumbles. But I think it turned out all right. You'll have to let me know in the comments. And again, if you like that kind of thing, please be sure to like it and share it around and let people know. I'm trying to attract other true crime creators on there as I can. I have some other people lined up for future episodes, but the more the merrier, as they say. Beyond that, what is up with today? Well, today all comes from a tweet. A tweet from, well, their Twitter name is something that would probably get me in trouble or something a little bit, maybe. I don't know. But either way, on Twitter, it's Buckmon21, Bucmon 21, a prolific tweeter and such. And she put up a couple of screenshots of a Forbes article that looked like was right up my alley. It was about DEI in schools, an opinion piece, an op-ed written by a DEI expert that I can't say I've heard of before. But is at least relatively prolific. And so I looked up this DEI expert, and his name is Sean Harper. And Sean Harper is a contributor to Forbes magazine. And so what I thought I'd do, just for the heck of it, is I have two items. I have a video that's about 5 or 6 months old, which was an interview with Sean Harper at Forbes magazine. And then I have the article itself that caught my interest in the first place, which, aside from the couple of screenshots I glanced at, I haven't read in full, so it'll be mostly surprise to me. So yeah, it's going to be a video and then an article in relatively chronological order covering DEI in various forms. I think first the video has to do with a sort of overall scorecard of DEI successes or failures in 2022, or 2021, I'm not quite sure. And then an article specifically on schools and DEI. So we're going to run the gamut, but the one common denominator is the speaker/author, Sean Harper, who, again, I can't say I've heard of before, but I'm happy to find out. A few more hellos before we get into it. Bishop, good morning. Shadowclaw, good morning. Seftus Wolf, good morning. And I think that's everybody I see. Again, if I missed you, if you're in the future, if you're lurking, good morning. So, so I'll have to split between the two mediums as we go. Let's start off with this video from Forbes magazine. And the video's original title is Major DEI Promises Were Made in 2020, but Were They Kept in 2022? Well, I don't know. Or by 2022, something like that. So they're going to take a look at goals set in 2020 and where things stood by the time 2022 ended, I guess. So with all that as preamble, oh, by the way, before I forget, as I always seem to do, at the top of the chat box, if you take a look at the fundraisers posted there, thankfully provided by Keever Dam. Thank you, Keever Dam, for our friends Moonshock, Angry Illinoisian, and Alyssa. If you guys could take a look at those and see if you could donate to help them out. If you can't donate, that's fine. But if you can share those links out on social media, that would be very much appreciated. All right. All that is preamble. This one runs just under 13 minutes. I'll start off with a few seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed.
Welcome to Forbes Talks. Joining me now is Sean Harper, a contributor here at Forbes.
Okay, you guys hear that all right? Sean Harper, contributor at Forbes. The video is a little staggery naturally. There wasn't anything I could do about that, but it's like its frame rate is just slightly off for some reason. Sound is fine, says Derek LaRue. I can hear it, says Hammer. Sounds good, says Keeverdam. All right, let's continue.
Sean, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
As you know, you cover diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was a big DEI push starting in 2020.
Wait, DEI push starting in 2020? What have I been doing for the last 7 years?
But 2 years out, have you seen tangible growth in the workplace when it comes to DEI?
Tangible growth when it comes to DEI. Well, I guess the question is he going to define terms, and is he going to specify what goals were set and how those were formulated? Because quotas suggest something possibly slightly illegal.
The answer is yes and no. Following the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, many CEOs, executives, and other leaders in companies stepped up and made statements declaring that those murders were horrific, acknowledging the existence of systemic racism.
What does that have to do with CEOs? What does the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor have to do with CEOs and companies? Those incidents are rightly examined on a law enforcement level, on police training, use of force, everything else. What does that have to do with CEOs and companies? I've always wondered that, because every time I've watched a panel discussion where you look at a bunch of CEOs or CFOs or chief diversity officers in companies and corporations that have absolutely no connection whatsoever to those events, what's the logic there? I've never quite understood, except as it's just an excuse to be one big virtue signal and push their ESG numbers forward under a veil of righteousness.
And calling for more attention on diversity, equity, and inclusion broadly within their workplaces. That is praiseworthy. It's commendable. It was exciting
But
at that time. But unfortunately, what we've seen over the past 2.5 years since that moment is a fizzling of that corporate enthusiasm, surely for systemic racism, but really for, other aspects of DE&I. So
DE&I? Okay. Well, then my question continues. What exactly were they supposed to do about it? I mean, mechanically speaking, in a corporation, in a company, what were they intending to do? What did they state they would do? I mean, I have some of my own answers from listening to such leaders over the last several years, but I'm curious to hear what the final report is.
So on the one hand, yes, it got so much more attention in 2020, but really here now at the end of 2022, not so much.
So 2 years later, have these promises been made, and how can people keep them accountable?
Okay, what were the promises? And how do you hold someone accountable? Like if a company says, in honor of George Floyd, we're going to work to achieve racial parity in our workforce by 2025. That might sound weird, but that's not completely off base from things I've heard before. Okay, well, if they made a promise like that, how could they possibly achieve it without implementing racial discrimination or something? And then if they didn't, let's say they made some high-minded promise, or maybe it wasn't even anything as specific as that, but just something very broad and nebulous, like we're going to work to promote racial justice in our company, whatever that means. If they didn't do it to the effect that you desired, what does holding them accountable mean exactly?
Well, one way we can hold businesses accountable is calling for them to make good on the financial promises they made in the name of George Floyd.
The financial promises? What financial promises?
One of my Forbes pieces, is asking, where is the $200 billion, billion with the B, that companies pledged in summer 2020? So many of those dollars remain uncommitted.
Wait. Okay. I hope he expands on this. $200 billion was promised to what? Exactly. From who? I need a specific example. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just like $200 billion was promised to what?
And therefore unspent, right? And many of the leaders who made those commitments, time bound them, right? It was, $1 billion over, the next 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years.
To what? And how do you hold them accountable for, if somebody's going to really take it that seriously, I suppose, what is the penalty for not making good on this promise? I guess you could boycott or something if you cared enough.
Well, now we're 2.5 years in, and so many of those companies and the people who lead them have not spent the money. So
wait, who, what companies, how much money, and what did they promise to do with it? And or what should it have been spent on? What could a company have done? What could a company do with $1 billion to prevent the next George Floyd? If that was the impetus for this entire thing, I'm okay. I need some more information.
That is, I think, the most pressing thing that that we need in terms of accountability.
What, a payoff? For what? To do what?
But even for organizations that did not make financial investments, many of them did make verbal promises.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but a handshake and a smile is the worst kind of agreement you can get in life. You want it in writing, you want it in blood, practically. But okay. Yeah, lip service and PR, I can't imagine. All right, so monetary commitments, which aren't specified. I'm not saying that there haven't been some. Trust me, I can believe that many corporations made statements about, we're going to dedicate X number of dollars over a number of years to do this, that, and the other. I'd like an example of a company that has failed to meet with its obligation, or its promise, I should say. But as far as like verbal agreements and things, sorry, dude, that might just be pillow talk.
Certainly to their Black employees, to their employees of color, and really to all of their other employees, their white employees too.
Like what? What promises were made?
That they were going to take DE&I much more seriously.
What does that mean? What? I feel like I'm watching a TEDx talk.
So I do think that accountability means developing a strategy, not just having a one-time workshop on implicit bias, or a one-time town hall on systemic racism, but really getting serious about embedding DE&I into every aspect of the business.
Okay, I know. I'm a broken record. What does that mean? Because here's the thing, and I know this is cynical of me. You may remember a few months ago, I looked at a roundtable discussion between several DEI experts, advocates, officers, and so on. And their biggest concern at the top of that discussion was the diminishing focus on DEI, specifically as far as funding and commitment by companies, because it really sounded like they were more concerned with the diminishing returns of their own chosen careers rather than the actual benefits of whatever it was they were doing. Not being able to show an actual benefit to the company's bottom line by investing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into DEI programs and initiatives. So when I hear things like this that are very generalized and like, really, we can't just have a one-time workshop. We need to really embed this and make this a consistent thing. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I can't help but think that maybe our speaker, as a self-proclaimed DEI expert, might be just biased a bit towards his own self-interest. Maybe.
Let's talk about how can business leaders really, instead of these blanket statements, maybe a one-time workshop, embed this in their greater strategy.
Yes. Okay. Kudos to the interviewer asking for specificity. How would you do this? Let's go.
Sure. We have to think about it in the ways that we think about other business functions and practices. For example, many companies rely so heavily on technology, not just for one function of the business, but really for just about everything that the business does.
Yes, technology, from the wheel to the smartphone. Yes, we all use technology.
Right? You have to think about the goodness and the reliability of those technological resources. But we have to think about DE&I in the same way.
What?
Imagine, for example.
Okay. No. This is the second time you said example, and your first example wasn't really an example, but okay.
If you run a business and the Wi-Fi goes out or there's no internet access, right? That business is brought to its knees for, the 10 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, half hour, whatever it is that there's no internet. We have to think about DE&I in that same way, right? Like,
okay, this feels like we're approaching a stretch that would require Mr. Fantastic to achieve.
It's not just the thing that ought to, sit over here in the chief diversity officer's shop, but we have to think about it in the ways that we think about technology, for example, or the ways that we think about financial stability.
What? Okay, so DEI needs to be thought of like Wi-Fi. What? Okay. All right. Okay. She asked the question. That's his answer. Now, here's the follow-up question. Does she hold his feet to the fire to clarify, or does she move on?
And obviously the past 2.5, now almost 3 years, remote work has really come into a factor since the pandemic. And a lot of offices are either remote or a hybrid. So how does DE&I efforts factor into this?
He hasn't even described what it is to begin with, or how it would be used in the workplace, or what the strategy would be, or how he would embed it, or anything else. How can you move on to that question when he didn't answer your first question? Okay.
Yeah. My very first piece on Forbes.com was about the DE&I implications of
DE&I. Nobody calls it DE&I. It used to be called D&I. It's just DEI. Or they're trying to make it DEIB with belonging now. DE&I, that's so awkward. Just say DEI. Okay.
Of remote work. And it was in response to this really great announcement that Meta made about the increase of employees of color over, some period of time during the pandemic. And, Facebook Meta in the report was saying that part of that increase was attributable to the company's willingness to let more people work from home. So therefore, they attracted more diversity.
I mean, sure. I mean, there is some truth to that, because once you take away the barriers of a commute, someone with the skills that doesn't necessarily have to live next to the business in order to do a job, that does open up pathways that otherwise wouldn't be there for a lot of people. So in that sense, sure. But was that a targeted result, or is that just a consequence of doing away with the commute? you increased the percentage of, I still just, hate this phrase, people of color. Like, I know this is a tangent, but when I was growing up, I only ever heard the phrase colored people when it was either a documentary about the bad old days of the South or some movie like Mississippi Burning, where you had the bad guys, the Ku Klux Klan or other racists, trying to separate other people out. It still feels so awkward to me to divide people on this basis in the modern day. But anyway, okay, so Facebook, Meta, who have been laying people off left and right for the last several months, by the way, they saw an increase in certain racial demographics as a result of remote working. Okay, was that, again, intentional, or was it just happenstance? And if it was intentional, doesn't that indicate something else is going on that might be mildly legally and or ethically questionable?
In the article, I praised the flexibility of that company, but then I also talked about not just for Facebook, Meta, but also for other companies, how we have to be mindful of ensuring that those diverse employees who are working remotely are being afforded opportunities to be seen and to lead in ways that will ultimately facilitate their acceleration.
So you need to make special accommodation for people in your company on the basis of their skin color? What if I work remotely and I don't turn on a webcam? Why do I need to be seen if I'm getting my work done? Right? Equal opportunity, not equality of outcome. Okay.
And their, advancement to more senior level leadership roles within the organizations. So recruitment, hiring, and promotion practices in the company need to be geared towards, first and foremost, racial preference. I mean, that's not even an implication here. That's an explicit request or demand. Sounds not good. So that is the thing that ought to, continue to be top of mind for managers and people leaders and executives, right? Ensuring that there are equitable opportunities for those colleagues who are working remotely.
No. You didn't say equitable opportunities. No. You said specific fast-tracking preference based on race. You never brought up merit. You never brought up tenure or anything actually, tangible about someone's work ethic or skills or abilities. You said race. No. But it's interesting you said equitable opportunities, not equality of opportunity. Mixing terms here. Because equitable opportunities indicate an equality of outcome, specifically on the basis of race. Your own words. Okay.
To have opportunities for advancement.
Mm-hmm. What you're describing sounds kind of like a mixed bag when it comes to remote work. So does remote work make it easier or harder for DE&I measures to be adhered to?
Okay, what is a DE&I measure? Right, what exactly is one? Name one. You haven't said how that works yet. What is the mechanism? Name one mechanism, one written down in the company bylaws or whatever else, hiring instructions or practices, that is a DEI measurement. How does that work? I mean, maybe there's something innocuous. I don't know. But until they tell us something specific, I can only imagine.
Yeah, I think it makes it harder in the absence of strategy.
What?
This is not an unsolvable problem.
You could have fooled me. It's been going on 7 years that I've been looking at it, and every time they come up with a problem or a solution, it's still not enough. And it's a never-ending story. We have so much more work to do. We have a long way to go. I did a video on Facebook's diversity progress back in 2019, I think it was. And they were looking at their results after 5 years of effort. And it was, as far as their stated goals were concerned, as far as racial split in their workforce, it was kind of pathetic, which brought up a whole other range of questions. But okay, tell us about the strategy, the thing, the stuff, the what.
It just requires, executives and other leaders to think preemptively about what equity looks like.
Think preemptively about what equity looks like, such as, like, are you talking about literally looks like? Because I have a feeling you might be. Or are you talking about just percentages, which is similar too? What does that mean?
And what it will require for colleagues who are working remote, as well as those who are working on site. I mean, let's not forget about the in-person on-site employees, but I do think that this is a solvable challenge, but not in the absence of strategy. Way too many companies, not just on the question of remote work, but really on so many other aspects of DE&I. So many companies believe that haphazard one-time programming kinds of things or food festivals, that those kinds of things are going to move the needle.
Okay, well, I'll stipulate for the sake of argument, those things won't move the needle. What will? Name the thing, name the program, name the initiative or the new rule that has to be put into place in a company to actually move the needle.
On diversity, equity, and inclusion. They don't.
Then what does?
Right? We have to treat it like we treat the finance.
What does that mean?
Strategy. We don't just give the keys to the CFO and say, okay, take off in the car and, whatever happens, happens. Like, no, we expect that person to have KPIs. We expect that person to do some modeling and to communicate and collaborate with others throughout the organization to ensure the fiscal health of the business.
Well, okay, then describe a successful, or describe, even if you can't name the company because of some kind of privacy or something, outline an effective DEI strategy that a company could implement. There's got to be dozens and dozens and dozens of examples by now, or at least hundreds of lessons learned by attempts made after nearly a decade or more of this stuff being implemented across different companies and different organizations. Describe one. Describe a good plan. Or is that giving away the special herbs and spices and nobody will hire you then if you tell everybody your trade secrets? I mean, what's... Hey.
We have to treat DE&I in that same way, including on the metric of remote work equity.
What? These aren't answers to anything. I don't know why I expect any better from corporate entities and people involved in corporations and things. This is all just corporate speak babble. It all sounds good, but how is it actually implemented? Or is there a fear of actually describing how it's implemented?
I hear you. So let's say you're the CEO of a company right now. How would you implement this strategy and make it happen so that there is a really tangible DE&I strategy in place?
Wait, let me hear that question again. For a second I was getting hopeful, but let's try that again.
Equity.
I hear you. So let's say you're the CEO of a company.
Let's say you're the CEO of a company. Okay, I am the CEO of Scribelite Incorporated.
Right now. Yeah. How would you implement this strategy?
How would I implement this strategy? A strategy that hasn't actually been described yet and only talked about in the most nebulous and abstract of ways. But okay, how would I implement this strategy?
And make it happen.
So
that there is a really tangible DE&I strategy in place.
Okay. So she asked the same question twice in one question. How would I implement this strategy in a tangible way? What are the odds that our speaker is going to give us a clear answer? I think I'd rather pull a bar in Vegas or something.
Yeah, well, first off, it has to be in partnership with the people.
in partnership with the people. If they're your employees, their partnership is, well, already assumed if they want their next paycheck.
And by the people, I mean employees.
Yes.
Those who work on site as well as those who are working from home.
Okay, let's assume that everyone who wants to continue being paid in my company is on board. If they want to continue. If I've decided that this is part and parcel with my company's culture and strategy, it's not really a matter of choice.
Or working remotely. That's going to be really important. Too many.
Okay. Let's say there was resistance. How would you counter that?
Well-intended leaders will go and make policy or develop strategy without meaningful input from the people who are actually going to be affected by those policies and strategies.
Well, what does the input matter? I mean, who's implementing the strategy? Who is the leader here? If you're going to leave it to your employees to determine what the strategy should be, why are you there as the leader? Encountered the same thing 7 years ago when I did a video on the chief diversity officer of eBay. And it was something to the effect of, and I'm reaching here a little bit, but he'd only been in the job for some limited period of time, like a year or a year and a half or something. And he said one of the first things he did when he got in the job was go to the employees and ask them, what does diversity mean to you? And I'm like, wait a second, you're the chief diversity officer and you're asking for random interpretations of that word from employees to help inform your job? What? Everything old is new again.
So step one would be to bring folks to the table, colleagues, teammates to the table, including those who work remotely. Also,
to do what?
I think, part of what the strategy requires is thinking about what are the existing pathways to advancement.
The existing pathways to advancement? What does existing pathways to advancement have? Okay. If you don't describe the problem, then nothing you offer as a solution makes any sense. Okay, you have to describe what is DEI, what is the problem that DEI is attempting to solve. It's been implied, but not stated. So we're just talking about getting a better job, or getting a higher paying job, or a more influential job. What are the paths to advancement? I don't know, doing a good job in the job that you've got and seeking a promotion when it seems viable to attempt to do so. What else are you talking about?
And to pay equity and so on within the company.
Okay, well, if you've got evidence that people are not being paid what they should be paid based on experience and time and everything else, if you actually find a disparity that actually indicates an inequity, there are laws about that. Advancement and pay equity on the basis of...
And then to rethink those pathways through the prism of remote work, right?
What?
Like, here's what it has taken, historically to advance in our company. Now let's rethink what that means for people who we don't see in the office, 3 days a week or 5 days a week or...
What has that got to do with DEI? Okay, reconfiguring the way your business assesses people's performance because of the changes with remote work, that's across the board. That's a universal concern, right? Because if I'm not commuting to the office anymore, if I sit down at my desk at the office and I do my job and I'm there 8 hours a day, and then I go home, but then if I'm working remotely, the whole dynamic changes. I don't have to commute. I'm not sort of waiting around in the break room, on and on and on. I get my work done. How do you assess that? These are all things that companies are having to reevaluate right now. What does any of that have to do with diversity, equity, or inclusion? Seriously.
Ever, right?
Sorry, let me back up because I cut them off.
People who we don't see in the office, 3 days a week or 5 days a week or ever, right? Those are two things that immediately come top of mind.
What? What none of that said anything about anything. She asked, how would you implement this strategy to get tangible results? I'm paraphrasing, but that's what she asked. And he said nothing. Nothing.
Looking forward, are you optimistic about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace in 2023 as we sit right on the cusp of the new year?
I guess you would have to first know what exactly is it you're trying to achieve with DEI, and then you can measure whether you've achieved it. So is it measurable or isn't it? And if it is, then we're talking quotas, aren't we? And if we're talking quotas, then we're talking discrimination in some way, shape, or form to achieve the numbers you want, regardless of merit, experience, skill, or anything else. Again, maybe it's the poverty of my imagination. But when somebody says, I want to achieve this kind of demographic split in my company, I have a hard time imagining how else you get there without implementing discrimination of some kind or another in your hiring, recruitment, hiring, and promotion practices. I don't know of another way you get there. And there's a lot of legal, black letter law, legal entanglement with making statements or moves like that.
I am absolutely optimistic.
Oh,
It is that optimism that, fuels me every day in the things that I write, certainly the courses that I teach here at USC, and definitely in the work that I do.
Yes, because your livelihood depends on it continuing, right? I mean, you're a DEI contributor to Forbes. You're a DEI consultant and expert. I don't know what classes you teach. That's outside the realm of my knowledge, but I have a feeling that it kind of entwines with that as well. So, of course, you're optimistic because you have to be.
With the dozens and at times hundreds of companies and organizations. But that optimism has to be met with strategy.
Was that a brag? Was he just bragging there? Hold on. Let's try that.
USC, and definitely in the work that I do with the dozens and at times hundreds of companies and organizations.
By the way, I'm kind of a big deal.
But that optimism has to be met with strategy.
Okay, what strategy? What? I've been wondering since it started. What strategy? What is the strategy? How does it work?
Right. I think one of the things that I attempt to do is help leaders develop robust, sustainable DE&I strategies.
Great. Could you outline one for us in specifics, possibly?
Not just programming. So if 2023 is going to look different than 2022 and prior years,
yes,
it's going to be because business leaders finally took seriously the responsibility of developing sustainable strategy.
What? I know, broken record, fill in the blank right here.
Around DE&I.
We talked about business leaders, but how can employees really hold these business leaders accountable for this?
How can employees hold business leaders accountable? If you have to kind of describe what it is that's being held to account first, but okay.
Sure. I think employees have so much more power than they recognize.
I don't know. Have you ever heard of a union?
Business leaders don't really like scandals.
So is that your advice to employees? Start a scandal? I mean, it's not like it hasn't worked in the past, but okay. So remember, the question is, how can employees hold business leaders accountable? Business leaders don't like a scandal. Okay.
Or public-facing stories that, call attention to failures within the business. I think that employee resource groups,
ERGs. Oh boy, how can ERGs help hold business leaders accountable.
And, other groups of employees ought to come together and think about how they can
start a scandal, do a protest, make a big PR problem for the company,
leverage their collective voices and flex their collective muscle.
So unionize?
To help leaders understand how vulnerable the business is to public scrutiny on its failure.
Okay, so, hey, boss, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to let the public know just how vulnerable you are to scrutiny and scandal. It's not extortion or blackmail. No, it's me encouraging you to see the the truth of the situation. That's your advice to employees. Extort your bosses, threaten scandal and PR nightmare unless they get their way. Okay, I mean that's one way to do it, I guess.
To enact the DE&I values that it espouses. So, in other words, what I'm suggesting,
yes,
I'm not necessarily calling for diverse employees to gather and protest.
No. I just brought up employee resource groups and collectivizing and holding the business leaders to account and say, you don't want a scandal, do you? No, I'm not suggesting that at all. Except that's exactly what you just suggested.
What I am suggesting, though, is that when they speak in a unified voice, one that is serious, it is more likely to compel leaders to act.
So extort your bosses with the threat of bad PR. That is your suggestion. There's no way around what you've said and suggested here. That is what you are advising employees to do. Extort their bosses with the threat of bad PR. I mean, it's one way to do it.
Much more swiftly and hopefully much more strategically and sustainably.
Yeah, don't make it seem like you're throwing a tantrum. No, make it strategic, sustainable. Let them know the vulnerabilities of the business to scandal. Okay.
Sean Harper, thank you so much. And I hope that you'll join us in the new year and we can talk about this as it unfolds.
Of course, it would be my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, just under 13 minutes of pablum. Nothing. Weightless babble. Okay. All right. Well, I don't know why I expect any different. But like I say, I'd never heard of our speaker before. I wanted to find out. And now I know. And knowing is a continued source of disappointment. Anyway, let's move on, shall we, to the wonderful world of the article that was released, I think, just the other day. So this video was from about 6 months ago, as they mentioned at the turn of the or the advent of 2023 oncoming. And now we're going to move over to an article as soon as I do this. And then I do this. And I think I might have to zoom in a little bit like that. There we go. All right. So this one is a Forbes article from our same speaker, Sean Harper. And this is from June 9th, 2023, so just 2 days ago, on a completely different aspect of DEI. And so here we go. Why politicized attacks on DEI in schools are occurring and how they're bad for America. Now remember, DEI in schools gives us things like racial affinity groups in schools. Divvying up children on the basis of their skin color in a public school. I can't imagine why someone would have a problem with that in this day and age, but whatever. Anyway, let's move on. Let's see. Books that include LGBTQ persons and families have been banned in many school districts across the country. Do you want to go into detail on what's included in those books, the kind of material, images, subject matter, and so on? It's just the problem is LGBTQ. Okay. Toni Morrison classics have been pulled from library shelves, so too have other texts written by influential authors of color. Because they're authors of color? Or is there a curation of material being put in front of children because some of it might not be appropriate for their age group? Educators have been forced to discard lessons on various diversity, equity, and inclusion topics from the curriculum. Such as, do you have examples? What constitutes a diversity, equity, and inclusion topic? And what grade levels are we talking about? Despite far too little evidence that critical race theory is being taught to school children. Far too little evidence? Well, as you may remember from about, 2 Sundays ago now, something like that, we had, and any other multiple critical race theory things I've looked at in the past, critical race theory and its elements have been and are being used in K through 12 schools. There's no doubt about it. It's not a theory, quote unquote. It's a truth. But people that still deny that truth are just gaslighting you. Despite far too little evidence that critical race theory is being taught to school children, Education Week reports that 44 states have introduced bills since January 2021 that aim to ban CRT or otherwise suppress teaching about race. It's not teaching about race. It's teaching race as a value system. It's teaching race as a value system. And, as always, if CRT is not being taught in elementary schools, then laws banning CRT mean nothing, right? Anti-DEI laws have been passed in 18 of those states. Even conservative school districts within progressive states like California have implemented policies to ban books and lessons pertaining to influential LGBTQ Americans, racism, and other dimensions of diversity. Okay, give me an example. Give me an example. You say so. It sounds really bad, sort of. Many states have placed restrictions on the expenditure of public funds on DEI-focused professional development experiences for employees of K through 12 schools and higher education institutions. Why? What language exactly is in those pieces of legislation or those policies? What is their motive? Presidential candidate and Governor Ron DeSantis has banned public spending on DEI initiatives at colleges and universities in his state. Why? What is the key text in a lot of those policies and or legislation? Now, as I've said on previous streams, in the case of the Florida laws and things being proposed and or passed, I too have some concerns about the ambiguity of the language therein. But what is the intention? And what is the specific language that is addressing to the problem it's trying to address in the language of the legislation? That is setting a value on race and or gender, or attributing a victimhood or villainy to people on the basis of their race or gender in schools. That's what it's attempting to prevent. Are you going to mention that part? All these DEI suppression activities are going to have devastating effects on our democracy and American business. Okay, so we have, and again, just to reiterate, Sean Harper, I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI expert. And from the previous video, we know that his work is centered around DEI initiatives and corporate contracts. So all these DEI suppression activities are going to have a devastating effect on my business. I can't help but think of it in that way because we're not listening to an unbiased source here. It's important to acknowledge why these politicized attacks are occurring, because they're promoting racial segregation and or racial valuation in schools and society. DEI initiatives in educational institutions have always been met with internal and external resistance. Why? In other words, okay, the backlash we're seeing at this time isn't new. Okay, well, what are the arguments for and against DEI initiatives? Right? Whether you agree with them or not, state the main ones. You know, what are the pros? What are the cons? And if you're sure that you can disprove the concern over the cons, then do so. But the opposition has been especially and dangerously intense since Barack Obama left the White House. What? Many Americans erroneously convinced themselves that by electing a black man to the U.S. presidency, our nation was instantly done with racism. Well, I'll tell you what, racism's never going to go away. But the fact that a non-white individual was elected to the presidency, can you at least admit that that's a good sign that things have changed on a drastic level? There is no cure-all for the worst of human reflex, right? We're never going to solve murder. We're never going to solve theft. We're never going to solve hatred as a concept or racism or inequity at all, right? But you got to admit, that was a pretty good sign that things have changed drastically in the last generation or two. Why can't you take good news for what it is? Thank you, Mr. Tickle Trunk, for the happy, smiley, lovely dog cat fox. Oh, dog cat fox.
Wow. Wow.
There's a Sinatra dog cat fox. Thank you, Mr. Tickle Trunk, so very much. Hope you're having a good Sunday so far. Come on, get back. There we go. The Obama administration did much to affirm DEI, then entered Trump. Yeah, because, wait. The backlash we're seeing at this time isn't new. Oh, but then entered Trump. Okay, what did Trump do? Because, I mean, I was still making videos about DEI initiatives in companies while Trump was president. On election night in 2016, CNN political commentator Van Jones emotionally explained that Trump's victory was a white lash against a changing country, a white lash against a black president, unquote. Except for how many of the people that voted for Trump also previously voted for Obama? During the 2016 campaign, Trump made numerous offensive remarks about Muslims, immigrants, Black Americans, Mexicans, and many other people who make our nation diverse. And thank you, Ebony Williams, for the happy, smiley dog cat fox. Oh, dog cat fox.
Wowee, wow.
Oh, there's an irate Alex dog cat fox. Thank you, Ebony, very much. Hope you're having a good day as well. And okay, according to Pew Research Center data, 54% of white voters casted their ballots for Trump, compared to 6% of Black and 28% of Latino voters, respectively. That nearly 63 million Americans, the overwhelming majority of whom were white, voted for Trump to become president, was a strong rejection of diversity and inclusion. Or it was a strong rejection of Hillary Clinton. Or it was a strong rejection of the policies and practices of the Obama administration, not having anything to do with his race, because most of those people also voted for Obama in the first place. Maybe. I mean, that's an interesting conclusion to jump to. Let's see. Once he assumed office, Trump continued making offensive comments about diverse populations without penalty or apology. Okay, well, what penalty should someone suffer for saying something you don't like in this country? Simply saying something you don't like. Thank you, Ebony Williams, again, for the cool pair. Oh, pair. Au pair? I don't have an au pair. I've seen one before. I don't know where I'm going with that. Anyway, in September 2020, he signed an executive order banning DEI trainings in federal workplaces, including our nation's military. Okay. I'm not a fan of executive orders in general, so I'm not a fan of that. I prefer that things move through Congress as they're supposed to. The New York Times reported just a few weeks later that Trump's executive order on combating race and sex stereotyping had a quick and chilling effect on diversity trainings in government agencies. I'm not going to argue against the effect, because diversity trainings in government agencies promote racism, promote racial valuation in people. So I don't know. I can't argue with the outcome, even if I have a problem with the mechanism that implemented it. Those effects also extended to public K through schools and higher education institutions, as leaders worried that the continuation of DEI efforts would jeopardize their federal funding. What is the argument of the opposition? Okay, again, even if you think that it is unfounded or wrong, you have to at least articulate what is the opposition's stance on the subject. You know, if I was coming into this completely blank, I would still have absolutely no idea what the two sides of the argument are, because you haven't articulated one or the other. Just that DEI is supposed to be an eternal good. There are no faults with it. There are no questions or concerns. Anything that opposes DEI is an immediate no-go in your mind. Why? Why? Even though Joe Biden reversed Trump's executive order on his first day in office, efforts to dismantle DEI in schools had already snowballed into a large-scale political movement. Why? Is it based on nothing? Is it based purely on smoke? Are there no reasonable arguments against DEI? Or is it just meant to be considered an eternal and unquestionable good? It's noteworthy that Trump's ban on DEI trainings was issued less than 4 months after Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin murdered an unarmed black man. Is it? Uprisings ensued across America. You mean violent riots? And around the world, as teenager Darnella Fraser's video of Chauvin pressing his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes, 29 seconds emerged and went viral. That moment forced long overdue national conversations about systemic racism. Yeah, by way of violent riots and cities even ceding their own territory to protesters and turning whole swaths of their metropolitan area into a deadly garbage zone. Chaz, CHOP, whatever they decided to call it. I saw an article recently about CHOP, and I'd forgotten what it meant. It was the Capitol Hill organized protest, which sounded so much more peaceful and thoughtful than the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Talk about trying to just, sugarcoat a terrible thing with some kind of neutral sounding verbiage. That grappling was suddenly happening among family members at kitchen tables, between neighbors, and places of religious worship, on social media, in workplaces, and in schools. Yeah, it never occurred before. I mean, there was nothing like, Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown or any other number of incidents in the previous years that did the exact same thing. Only George Floyd brought this up. In most contexts, the reckoning lasted less than 6 weeks, but its endurance in schools persisted. Not everyone was in favor of that. Okay. Are they completely off base? Some parents didn't want their children being taught the truth about America's racial past and present because it was inconsistent with lies they'd been taught in their own schooling experiences. Are you talking about the 1619 Project by any chance? You going to specify? No. 3 years later, let's just jump over that, shall we? That continues to be the case. Why? What is the argument in opposition? Detail it. Another notable explanation for the attacks on DEI is the spread of misinformation via social media. Okay, what is some misinformation that you would like to correct? Unsubstantiated claims are made every day about what's occurring in K-12 classrooms and on college campuses. Such as what? DEI opponents often post one example of one book or one lesson or one drag queen reading to school children or one Pride Month celebration occurring in a single school under the exaggerated guise that those things are happening everywhere. They aren't. Okay, that may be correct, but let me ask, are affinity groups happening in more than one school? Are teachers teaching children to assess themselves and others around them on the basis of their skin color? It might not be as, flashy and clashy as a drag queen reading, but are there elements of racial valuation and identity politics being pushed on school children right now in more than one school and school district across this country? Has it become part and parcel with many school districts, public school districts, to teach children curriculums that include lessons on assessing themselves and other people on the basis of their skin color due to historical events? Not simply teaching historical events as things that happened, but then extending those events to making children believe something about themselves as related to them today. Is that or is not that not happening in many school districts across this country? But okay, these things aren't happening in many schools. Okay, what are the numbers? Like how many schools is it occurring in? Right? What are the percentages? Of all the school districts across the country, what percentage of schools have these things, as you've listed here, happening? Are you going to provide us that evidence? No? Okay. There's absolutely no evidence, for example, that children are being taught that all white people are racist in any widespread fashion at schools across the country. Oh, okay, so it is happening. It's happening in some small way. Widespread, not in any widespread. Oh, okay. In social media posts, DEI obstructionists are lifting up ML Webb's book, The Gay BCs, I'd never heard of that before, as an example of what's being taught to kids in schools. You mean teaching kids in elementary schools about sexual orientations and sex in general? There's no evidence that Webb's book is on the shelves in even 0.005% of classrooms and school libraries. Okay, well, maybe that specific book isn't, but are books similar to it in subject matter? So wait, you cherry pick one book out of how many that you kind of, referred to at the beginning of this article, but this one book isn't in many schools. Yeah, but what is the book about? The Gay BCs. Okay. Yet outrage on social media would have people thinking this text and other LGBTQ inclusive books are being assigned in just about every school. It's got nothing to do with the political stance of it all. It's got everything to do with, is this appropriate material for small children to be either taught or exposed to? And where is the realm between a school's responsibility of educating children and the parents' responsibility of raising their children? You're not addressing the concern. What is the concern of the parents that would be concerned about books like this? Oh, this one book isn't there. While there are dozens of other explanations for the current politicized attacks on DEI in schools, here's just one more. Is this where you're going to actually describe what the opposition's stance is, whether you agree with it or not? Okay. There's an actual, well-coordinated, intentionally orchestrated, and highly funded political movement that's succeeding. Lies, misinformation, and exaggeration fuel that movement. White supremacy, systemic racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, and Islamophobia undergird the movement. Parents and families are being manipulated by the movement. It is succeeding in largest part because not enough people are fighting to stop it. Where? Show me the legislation that has either been passed or is attempting to be passed that promotes white supremacy, systemic racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, and Islamophobia. If you actually show me something that says these people shall no longer be allowed to do XYZ PDQ because of their sexual orientation, their race, where they come from, and so on. If you've got evidence that the bulk core of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and all the subsequent amendments and additions to it are being completely and totally torn asunder by a school district, not by a school district, by some state or legislative body, then I'll be right there with you. But it seems to me that DEI explicitly promotes the evisceration of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, time and time and time and time again. So I don't know what to tell you. You have to show us something. And pointing out one book and not addressing the fundamental problem that people have with that kind of quote unquote curriculum education in K through 12 schools doesn't cut mustard. I'm sorry. Today's students will become adults. Yes. If they're denied opportunities now to learn about racism and other dimensions of DEI, DEI teaches racism. It teaches valuation of people on the basis of their color or their gender or their orientation. Okay, it teaches discrimination. The only way you achieve DEI in companies and organizations is through mechanisms of discrimination. That's all that DEI can do because of that first letter, diversity. And diversity in this instance only means discrimination. If they're denied opportunities now to learn about racism and other dimensions of DEI, they'll enter professions in which they make discriminatory decisions and consequential missteps, unintentionally offend and exclude people, reproduce and exacerbate inequities, and erode the global competitiveness of America's business and military. Research makes irrefutably clear that diverse and inclusive organizations are higher performing. Can you cite that research in your article? Can you give any evidence at all of what you're saying has any grounding in reality at all? Also, conflicts and violence between racial groups will increase because citizens didn't learn enough about other racial groups, demographics, but whatever, or about our nation's racial history when they were in schools. Democracy will suffer. Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria. There's too much at stake to allow anti-DEI efforts and related misinformation campaigns to continue, and you did absolutely nothing in this article to give us any sense of what is at risk. Because you did not even bother to articulate what the opposition is and why they think what they do. It's just that anything that is anti-DEI is just obviously wrong. And anybody saying different is obviously a conspiracy theorist and is misinformed and is just some kind of zealot. There are not explicit statements made by CEOs and educators and business leaders and politicians over the years that I have chronicled again and again and again that in no uncertain terms push discrimination on the basis of race and gender and orientation and saying that these are good things, that the ends justify the means, that how a classroom looks is most important first and foremost, that we pair students with teachers who share their identity, i.e., like shall be taught by like, or we shall hire teachers on the basis of their skin color, or promote people on the basis of their gender, and on and on. I don't know what I expected, but I guess I got exactly what I expected. Okay, I could go on. But I happen to have many a video on these same subjects and with similar people trying to justify what is, in my opinion, unjustifiable. And it's not a matter of, and by all means, as LeVar Burton famously said, don't take my word for it. Okay? This is just my opinion. This is just my reading of these things and listening to people speak. Read it for yourself. Find other speakers and advocates for DEI. Listen to what they have to say. But also, as well, as I pointed out here, listen to what they don't say. Listen to what they don't include. Listen to what they're implying by their advocacy. Does it make sense? Does it align with what they say their goals are? And always ask, by what mechanism would you achieve that goal? You can't have an honest conversation or an honest debate between two opposing sides unless you fully and as best as you can articulate the stances of both sides. Okay, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It doesn't matter the subject matter. This is what you learn in debate school or debate class. Right? You have to at least give some time and resources to articulating the opposing side. If you're going to make your case, you have to present what their opposition is, and then you have to argue against it with what you think is the better argument. And this does none of that. This is just anyone who's for DEI is a good person. Anyone who's against DEI is some kind of conspiracy theory, right-wing nut job, and they're actually racist, homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic, etc. That's not an argument. That's just ad hominem attacks. That's not evidence. That's just rhetoric. That's not debate. That's dogma. Anyway, I'll take a minute here if you guys have anything you'd like to throw in here before I wrap up for the day. Shadow Sonata, and with that, he just invalidated the first sentence of the previous paragraph. Anything within that article probably did it. Anything in that article probably did it. I mean, let me count the ways. Let's see. Simon Willikins, I see that you have dark skin. You'll have to go to the room of black children to teach. It seems pretty messed up. And, you know, Simon's not wrong here. I mean, that sounds pretty like archaic, doesn't it? But go back to how many times I've watched educators and advocates for education say over and over again that students benefit from being taught by a teacher who they resemble. They can see themselves in their teacher. Hear that all the time. You have to be able to see yourself in your educator. Otherwise, you could never believe that you could achieve, et cetera, and so forth. So like, taught by like, is what's being advocated for. Let's see. Derek LaRue, thanks for the content. Scribelight. Well, thank you, Derek, so much for watching the content and supporting as you have. Standard Athlete, thank you, Scribelight. One day we'll get that example. I want some examples. I want some specificity. I want to know what they're talking about. I want the evidence. I want their evidence. I want to be able to know and have an understanding of another side's opinion and perspective on something, even if I don't end up actually agreeing with it. You know, the more frustrating thing than an absence of examples is a specificity of argument when it comes to these things. That I've said this before, and I will say it to the end of time. Part of the reason I do this stuff, part of the reason I created this channel is to force myself into a position where I am listening to and evaluating people and their opinions and beliefs and perspectives that in any other situation, I might reflexively just turn the channel, right? I don't want to hear it. We can't live like that anymore. If you want to be able to function in this massive information society, you have to expose yourself to ideas that on reflex you might find detestable, you might find you have an aversion to. Yet, if for no other reason than to understand what's being said, because who knows? You might learn something. You might have your mind changed. Or at the very least, you will better understand what it is you're opposing instead of just saying, I don't like it. Why don't you like it? Give examples as to why you don't like it. Create a better argument. That's the point. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this. What did you think about all this? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you liked the stream, please leave a like. If you didn't like the stream, by all means, please leave a thumbs down. I take your feedback seriously, whatever it is. And also share this stuff around if you want people to know that I exist, because I'm on a small little corner of the YouTube stratosphere. Programming note, I'll be here again Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of TED Excellence, where I'll take another look at an off-brand TED Talk, and then purportedly next Sunday as well for another Sunday stream. There may be, I'm not going to, write any checks I can't cash here, but there may be another Living on Borrowed Crime episode this month. Maybe. As always, it all depends on timing and scheduling and time and zip codes and time zones and everything else. I'm working on it. I will let you guys know as soon as I have something firmed up. But looking forward to that. Oh, and by the way, I have a Discord. If you're not a member of the Discord, well, it's a very exclusive club because I only give out links on the streams and they only last for a day. The link to the Discord is in the chat now, but there is a catch. That link will take you to a landing page called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you have to say the secret word. Because the secret word tells me and my moderators that you actually watch the stream and are an actual viewer. And so actually, today's secret word is expert. Today's secret word is expert. So go to the Discord if you're not already a member, say hello, say expert, and you'll become a member and can join everybody as we kind of casually sit around and chat. Because that's how exciting it is. All depends. You can make it more exciting. Join up. Everyone, thank you. Thanks. Let me try that again. Thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the fundraisers at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. Hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Hope the week ahead is productive and fun for you. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.